Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, Assalamu alaikum. It is a great pleasure to begin with the first panel of speakers with a challenging subject and a challenge to encapsulate some complex issues in, I'm told, 40 minutes maximum, which requires very short interventions and certainly shortest by me. We are going to talk about the changes and developments that one can see in the landscape of international dispute resolution. These are changes which mirror changes in the world's international trade and economic activity. We have seen developments in the landscape of dispute resolution in terms of the forms of dispute resolution that are available, in terms of the prevailing norms that apply to dispute resolution, and most significantly, in terms of the locations. Where in the world do the world's economic players want to have their disputes resolved? And that question has led to policy issues for governments, whether to establish a dispute resolution hub or a trusted location for the world's or the region's or local disputes to be resolved. And if one's going to develop such a center, how does one do it? What are the drivers? What are the considerations in so doing? We have an absolutely first-class, expert, illustrious panel to help us with those issues. Each of our panelists represents a different area or location and really what one may say as the future of dispute resolution in very much a changing world. So with those few remarks, I'm going to begin, if I may, with a series of questions which we'll take panelist by panelist and see how these issues develop. If I can begin, please, with Your Excellency, Dr. Walid. One of the significant achievements of Saudi Vision 2030 has been legislative reform. And in particular, 4 main laws, as I understand it, have been developed, most notably among them the law of evidence and the civil transactions law. In addition to a range of other developments and updating. Can I ask, how does Your Excellency view the impact of these legislative norms, these legislative moves, in the evolution of the legal environment, and in particular on the alternative dispute resolution industry?
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. لا شك أن التطور التشريعي في المملكة حصلت فيه عدد من النقلات، لكن النقلة الحالية هي نقلة تاريخية كبيرة جدا. القوانين الموضوعية هي أساس حل المنازعات، سواء بالنسبة للبيئة القضائية أو بالنسبة للوسائل المساندة لفض المنازعات كالتحكيم التجاري. مؤخراً صدر نظام المعاملات المدنية، وقبله كذلك صدر نظام الإثبات. هذه الأنظمة تعتبر الركن الأساسي في تحقيق أهم غايتين بالنسبة للوسائل المساندة لفض المنازعات أو كذلك بالنسبة للقضاء، وهي الشفافية في القواعد الموضوعية، وأيضاً تحقيق اليقين القانوني المسبق والقدرة على التنبؤ بالنتيجة التي ينتهي إليها التحكيم أو الحكم القضائي. ثم أيضاً هذه القوانين الموضوعية في مرحلة بنائها كان هناك استناد إلى عدد من الاعتبارات، لعل من أهمها مراعاة القوانين والتجارب الدولية المختلفة، وكذلك النواحي والقواعد القانونية المستقرة محلياً. وبالتالي أصبح هناك مساندة وخيارات إضافية لقطاع الأعمال باختيار التحكيم براحة أكبر من السابق، باعتبار أن القانون الذي سيصل إليه أو سيحكم في المنازعة محل التحكيم غالباً سيصادق عليها القضاء الموضوعي لوضوح القاعدة الموضوعية المسند عليها سواء من القضاء أو من التحكيم. وهناك أيضاً أمر مهم كان من صدور نظام التحكيم عام 1433 وهو الحجية المطلقة التي أضفاها المنظم على أحكام التحكيم وأحكام المحكمين، وهي حجية تجعل حكم التحكيم بمثابة سند تنفيذي ينفذ من محاكم التنفيذ بشكل مباشر. أيضاً من النواحي المهمة أن الطعن على حكم التحكيم أمام المحاكم السعودية ليس له إلا طريق البطلان، بمعنى أن محكمة الاستئناف إنما تنظر الطعن على حكم التحكيم كمحكمة قانون فقط، ولا تدخل في الموضوع بأي صورة كانت. وهذا لا شك أثر لدينا في سرعة تنفيذ أحكام المحكمين سواء المحليين أو من الخارج، وكذلك أيضاً الدقة وتأييد محاكم الاستئناف لمخرجات التحكيم. من خلال الإحصائيات خلال ال3 سنوات الماضية نعتقد أن المملكة من أسرع الدول في تنفيذ أحكام المحكمين، سواء من خلال محاكم التنفيذ أو من خلال نظر دعوى البطلان أمام محاكم الاستئناف. لا شك أن هذه النقلة التشريعية التي نمر فيها أعتقد أنها تجعل المملكة في المستقبل القريب هي الخيار الأمثل لاختيار التحكيم سواء محلياً أو خارجياً، وأيضاً باعتبار الوسائل الأخرى كانضباط الإجراءات وشفافيتها والرقمنة وما إلى ذلك من وسائل ودعامات أخرى مساندة.
Thank you very much indeed. If we can turn from one fast developing jurisdiction in terms of dispute resolution to another jurisdiction that has really well established itself as one of the world's leading, most popular jurisdictions for dispute resolution. If I can turn to Your Excellency, Minister Shanmugam, I was going to say, to invite you to comment on His Excellency's remarks, but knowing that some of them were in Arabic and you didn't have the benefit of translation, that would be unkind. So I'm going to ask you instead, knowing, as we all do, how Singapore has had a meteoric rise in terms of its standing in international dispute resolution, what would you say have been the enablers and the drivers of Singapore's success?
Thank you, Toby. I managed to listen to most of His Excellency's presentation because I managed to get the headphones. I would make 2 points. First is that law follows business. I make this point wherever, everywhere. You can have the best legal systems and best structures, but if there is no business, there is no work for lawyers. So we are fortunate to be in Southeast Asia, and if you look at the region, in a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years, that Asia-Pacific region would have the second largest economy in the world, China, the third largest economy in the world, India, the fourth largest economy in the world, which is Japan. And if you take the 10 countries of ASEAN, the Southeast Asian nations, they are already together the fourth, maybe fifth largest economy in the world. So it's a region of huge potential, a lot of business, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of investment. 50% of the world's FDI is coming into Asia, most of it into East Asia and Southeast Asia, not forgetting the Australian economy, which is one of the G20 countries. And 2/3 of the world's GDP growth is also coming from Asia. The Asia-Pacific region accounts today for 1/3, 35% of the world's GDP. And that's, if you take the west coast of the United States, the prospects for the region in terms of economic growth, trade, investments, infrastructure investments, we are talking about trillions and trillions of dollars. So we are fortunate to be in the middle of it. And if you look around Asia, some people would say we are today the only place in East Asia to be a financial, legal, and services hub which is situated outside of a major country, independent, neutral, and acceptable to all. But even if we don't go so far, we are clearly one of the major centers, one of the world's leading financial centers, one of the world's leading places for corporate HQs. Most of the Fortune 500 MNCs have their headquarters in Singapore. China finds Singapore attractive. Europe, US, Middle East, all of them find Singapore attractive to do business in if you want to be in the region, and you have to be in the region. So that's the start. The business has got to be there. There's got to be a business case. But there is a business case, and then the city or country has got to grab that opportunity. And there we have been successful because we are small, we are nimble, we realized what was necessary. I mean, of course, good geographical positioning, but you've got to have good logistics, be easy to get in, easy to get out, rule of law, a legal framework that is supportive of arbitration, a good judiciary that is supportive, a framework of laws relating to arbitration that support and promote arbitration. His Excellency spoke about transparency, all the other factors that are necessary for a good arbitration center. And a certain openness. You can bring in counsel from anywhere in the world, you can bring in arbitrators from anywhere in the world and do your arbitration in Singapore. So an openness, availability of legal talent, but at the same time openness for international lawyers to come and practice and do the arbitration work. International panel of arbitrators easily available and willing to come to the place, and a suite of dispute resolution services, because you need mediation, first-class mediation services, first-class arbitration services, and a strong judicial service. And we added to that by having the Singapore International Commercial Court, where people who don't have any linkage to Singapore can come and litigate in the Singapore courts if they don't want to do arbitration. I mean, that, in a nutshell, explains the approach. Independent, strong arbitral institutions, not just as SIAC, Singapore International Arbitration Center, but also international institutions like ICC and the AAA and others find place in Singapore. They find Singapore a good place to do business in. So it creates an ecosystem. And a government that doesn't interfere but is strongly supportive in many ways. And of course, the infrastructure, which is easy to replicate, a top-class arbitral place to do arbitrations, digitization, those go without saying. So if you put all of these together, then I think you can be successful. So we were in a sweet spot, and we grabbed the opportunities. And from what I can see, Riyadh is now in that kind of sweet spot for this region.
Thank you. So talking of sweet spots, opportunities, and some of the considerations that governments will take into account, turning, if I may, to Bahrain and Your Excellency, Mr. Nawaf, can I ask you, Bahrain has had really a pioneering experience with a type of hybrid commercial judiciary, I think which commenced in 2009 with the establishment of the court within the Bahrain Chamber of Dispute Resolution, the BCDR framework. And as I understand it, it was designed to be distinct from arbitration and the mediation mandate, a kind of hybrid form of litigation with certain characteristics of arbitration. That is a slightly different model. It's a choice which Bahrain has taken. I wonder whether you would elaborate and explain how that works and how you see it in terms of its effectiveness.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. طبعا في تأسيس غرفة تسوية المنازعات في مملكة البحرين، حرصت المملكة عند تأسيسها بتوفير قضاء ناجز للاستثمارات والتجار في مملكة البحرين. فهناك فصلين في قانون الغرفة. فصل أول أنشأت فيه محكمة وهي تسمى محكمة الغرفة، وهذه المحكمة معنية في اختصاصين: اختصاص نوعي وقيمي. الاختصاص النوعي فهي مختصة في جميع المنازعات التي تنشأ بين المؤسسات المالية المسجلة في مصرف البحرين المركزي، وأيضا المعنية بالشركات المسجلة أيضا في مملكة البحرين، وإن كان هناك أي نزاع عقاري. والاختصاص القيمي بأي مبلغ يفوق 500 ألف دينار، أي ما يعادل 1,300,000 دولار. وامتازت هذه المحكمة في فصلها المستقل عن فصل التحكيم، امتازت بأن هي تتقاضى، يكون درجات التقاضي في هذه المحكمة على درجتين فقط، مما يوفر العدالة الناجزة وسرعة البت في القضايا. وأيضا نطاق الطعون فيها أيضا حدد في قانون الغرفة. أما الفصل الثاني فهو فصل مستقل بذاته، لا يوجد أي ارتباط بين محكمة الغرفة ومركز التحكيم الذي موجود بالغرفة والوساطة، فهو مركز مستقل يقوم بدوره الاستقلالي الكامل وفريق الإداري المستقل الكامل. ولكن هناك ارتباط إداري استفادت بها المحكمة، وارتبطنا في إدارة الدعوة من التحكيم استفادت بها المحكمة في هذه التجربة. ولله الحمد البحرين استغلت الفرصة في هذه تجربة إدارة الدعوة في التحكيم بإصدار قانون إدارة الدعوة المدنية، وامتد النظام إدارة الدعوة في التحكيم، وأصدر نظام قانوني في البحرين بإدارة الدعوة انتقل إلى جميع الدعاوى المدنية في البحرين. فالنظام المشترك هو اشتراكهم في غرفة ولكن مؤسستين منفصلتين. القضاء هو قضاء عادي مستقل، ولكن درجات التقاضي تكون فيه على درجتين فقط. وشكرا.
Thank you very much indeed. So now, if I turn the tables to an international institution instead of the government perspective, and Your Excellency, Dr. Cheplak, can I just ask you now, the Permanent Court of Arbitration has been at the forefront, really, of international dispute resolution for over a century. It has seen the world of dispute resolution develop and evolve. Can I ask you for the PCA's perspective on that evolution in dispute resolution, perhaps some of the current challenges, and also, if I may, what is the PCA's perspective on the developments we see in the GCC and the Middle East region?
Well, let me start by saying that when I received the invitation from Dr. Hamed Mira, CEO of SCCA, I was very happy to be able to respond positively and come here, but I was not aware that I will be invited to a panel with 3 distinguished ministers of justice and moderated by one of the most influential international arbitrators. So I'm humbled, and still I hope I will be able to contribute with the perspective of international court and international organization, because you've mentioned the evolution of the PCA over 125 years. It is our anniversary year. And this evolution, if I may, in a nutshell, entails all 3 dimensions of the PCA. A PCA as the oldest international court in existence, as the oldest international organization destined or with the object of facilitating the peaceful resolution of international conflicts, and as, I would say, a service provider. I think we only became aware of this 3rd aspect now, but the presence of the 3 distinguished ministers of justice at the arbitration conference gives us a clear message that this is a dimension which we also think it's necessary to be included, otherwise the whole system won't work. So, in the consequence of the evolution, PCA developed into a modern, multifaceted institution which is able to meet the constantly developing needs of international dispute settlement. We are, as you put it, in the forefront of arbitration, but I mean it's quite obvious that we offer also conciliation, mediation, and other procedures, including what becomes more and more popular, neutral expert procedures. Now, what I think is in the gist, or what is the engine propelling this evolution, as well as the challenge which you mentioned, it's still what is, I would say, the cornerstone or our founding convention, that the court should be accessible at all times to all parties. Now, how we can materialize this commandment in 21st century in the world, and I would say there are different factors. But I think, and it was also clear in Jan Paulsen's message, we need a system which is built on trust. Now, we are happy to enjoy the trust of our shareholders. States are our shareholders, but also our clients. We are happy to enjoy the trust of our clients who come to us so that we can assist them. But the trust is based on knowledge, that you know institution, and we need to be present, because you cannot trust people whom you don't know, and you cannot get known people who are not present. I would say for us, and for me personally, the most challenging part of it is to be present and close to our users. Now, how to do it, maybe I will get a second chance to with another question, but I would like to also mention another a challenge, which is a kind of happy challenge, increasing docket. So if last year we received as many cases as we usually receive over 1 year, as these cases, they are very different from small, big, involving states entities, private companies, international organizations, all kinds. We are famous from first-class quality of services, how to scale up and never compromise on equality and stay present. So how to make this change to keep up with the speed? I would say that's our contemporary challenge.
Thank you very much. Now, picking up on one of the elements you've mentioned, the key element of trust, if I can come back to Your Excellency, Dr. Walid, speaking frankly, when you're an international user for arbitration, and you are looking as to where in the world you might want to locate your dispute resolution, one of the key considerations will be the judiciary, the local judiciary. And what one tends to think of course, will be how pro-arbitration are the local judges, how much will they interfere in the process, how much will they support the process, will they set aside awards, will they enforce awards? What would Your Excellency's message be, perhaps to an international audience, as to the current state of the judiciary in the kingdom?
هذا سؤال مهم جدا، والحقيقة أن الجواب عليه بالأرقام يعد الأصدق، ولكن قبل البدء بذكر النسب والأرقام، نحن في القضاء ننظر إلى التحكيم على أنه وسيلة مساندة وليست وسيلة بديلة. وهذا نظرنا لكافة الوسائل الأخرى التي تساند القضاء في حل المنازعات. ثم أيضا الحل التشريعي اللي سبق أن ذكرته أعطى جانبين لمسألة نظر القضاء لأحكام المحكمين سواء كانت محلية أو أجنبية. الأول أن الدعوة الوحيدة هي دعوى البطلان بمحددات قانونية ثابتة وواضحة، وأيضا أن مسألة مخالفة النظام العام يجب أن يراعى فيها القانون الذي اختاره المتحاكمين سواء القانون المحلي أو أي قانون دولي آخر. هذا من البداية. ثم أنه من خلال الثلاث سنوات الماضية طعن أمام محاكم الاستئناف وأمام محكمة متخصصة ودائرة متخصصة بنظر دعاوى البطلان في التحكيم أكثر من 4000 حكم تحكيم، وكانت مصادقة المحكمة للمرة الأولى على حكم التحكيم أكثر من 90%، بمعنى أن محكمة الاستئناف تؤيد أحكام المحكمين بنسبة 90%. ثم أيضا أحكام المحكمين الأجنبية التي اتجهت للتنفيذ أمام محاكم التنفيذ دون المرور إلى محكمة الاستئناف بلغ تنفيذ أكثر من 1.5 مليار ريال خلال الثلاث سنوات الماضية، بالإضافة إلى 3 مليارات أخرى هي حصيلة تنفيذ محاكم التنفيذ لأحكام المحكمين المحلية. وهذه النسبة تثبت أن هناك توافق بين الناحية الواقعية والنظر القضائي مع الناحية التشريعية، وأيضا مع تفاؤلنا في المستقبل إلى أن يزداد الإقبال على التحكيم. وبالتالي أرى أن التحدي الحقيقي ليس في الناحية التشريعية أو الناحية القضائية باعتبارها مساندة ومساندة بقوة لهذا الخيار، وإنما من ناحية توسيع نطاق التحكيم بحيث يكون شرط وعقد التحكيم خيار أساسي لدى قطاع الأعمال والأعمال التجارية على وجه الخصوص، ثم أن تكون مثل هذه المؤتمرات والأسابيع التي تطرح كل موضوعات التحكيم وتحدياته وأيضا إيجابياته الكبيرة على قطاع الأعمال بحيث يمكن التغلب على كافة التحديات التي تواجهه. لكن من الناحية العدلية ومن الناحية القضائية أعتقد أننا في المملكة ليس هناك أي تحدي أو إشكالية، بالعكس القضاء من الناحية الموضوعية وكذلك من الناحية الإجرائية ومن الناحية التشريعية هو مساند لخيار التحكيم كما أن التحكيم مساند للقضاء.
Thank you very much. Then on the theme of judges, if I can turn the tables back to Your Excellency, Minister Shanmugam, I want to ask you a question from a personal perspective. As my role as counsel, I have experience before international arbitrators, and I have experience in the Singapore International Commercial Court before international judges. And it's a very, very different experience. In my case, often it is the experience of friendly arbitrators and angry judges, but that just may be my cases. I would like to ask you about the choice that Singapore made in establishing both systems and promoting both systems. That's international arbitration and an international commercial court. Why have both? And perhaps more than that, what is the relationship between the two? Do they learn from each other? Do they help each other? Is there a synergy? Perhaps you can elaborate.
Toby, arbitrators are appointed by the parties. They need to be nice to you so that you'll reappoint them in future. Judges aren't appointed by you. Judges are appointed by the state, and whether or not you go to them, they still keep their job, so they can afford to scold you. So there are benefits to both, but I think often court hearings provide a certain discipline that sometimes is not there in arbitration. Sometimes, I mean, I haven't done one since I took office more than 15 years ago, so with a pinch of salt. Look, when we decided that we will have the Singapore International Commercial Court, we looked at dispute resolution, traditional sense, you go to the courts. Alternate dispute resolution, you have mediation, which we have through the Singapore Convention pushed quite hard because we think it's good for business and it keeps the relationship hopefully better than, say, arbitration or litigation might. And arbitration, of course, everybody understands. You need to offer that. If you want to become if you want to encourage business, people need to know that if there is a problem, there is a way of trying to resolve it and trying to get their money back in an enforceable way. But I also felt there is scope in Asia Pacific for a court that is modeled after arbitration, an international commercial court, where we will have a panel of judges, not restricted to Singapore judges. In fact, the majority will be from outside of Singapore, the civil law systems as well as the common law systems. So judges, senior judges, retired judges from UK, Australia, US, France, Japan, Korea, China. So you have a mix of, and Germany, mix of expertise to deal with all different types of cases. And the parties then have complete freedom of choice. If they want mediation, they go for mediation. They want mediation and arbitration, they go for mediation and arbitration. Or mediation, arbitration, and then mediation again. But there will be some parties, obviously some of your clients fall in that category, who might say, well, you know, rather than me appointing an arbitrator and the other side appointing an arbitrator, we rather let the Chief Justice of Singapore decide who the judges will be. And there could be one Australian judge, one Japanese judge, and one American judge, depending on the nature of the case. And I rather rely on that because then you know that this is not party appointed. It has got the discipline of a court. And at the same time, it's confidential. So there are certain advantages to that. Parties might like it. So we didn't look at it as contradictory to, but complementary to. So it's a suite of options. You decide. The state pays their salaries. And if they are not employed very actively, so be it. Doesn't matter. But if parties choose, it makes Singapore even more attractive because you now know you can have any type of dispute resolution that you want. Now, over a period of time, I think there would be synergy and sort of learning of best practices because Singapore being now, what, number one, number two, or number three, leading arbitral jurisdiction in the world, you will get some of the best arbitrators coming to Singapore, best arbitration counsel coming to Singapore. And it's inevitable that some of it will spill over into the International Commercial Court. And so those practices, there will be, I think, a degree of synthesis, learning from each other, fora like this. And it makes for, I think, a better dispute resolution center.
Thank you very much. Then, if we then look back at Bahrain, if we may, there are obviously many arbitral institutions around the world that are competing with each other to an extent. But even more so, what we're seeing is perhaps a competition between arbitration jurisdictions, between countries and potential arbitral seats. Can I ask from the Bahrain perspective, what do you see are the key factors in that competition that make Bahrain an attractive place? What are the key drivers from your perspective? Perhaps not just Bahrain, but from the government perspective, the drivers to make a seat a successful favored seat.
هناك في وجهة نظري أن هناك مسؤولية على الحكومات بأن تساند وتعزز الدعم لهذه مؤسسات التحكيم. طبعا مثل ما بين زميلي معالي الدكتور وليد بأن مراكز التحكيم هي مساندة للقضاء ويجب أن تحصل الدعم من الحكومات من الناحية التشريعية ومن ناحية تدريب القضاة وتقديم التعزيز في جميع الأمور المساندة الفنية إن كانت هذه الأمور تتطلب من نواحي دعم خدمات قضائية وتنفيذ. ونحن في مملكة البحرين نواكب التطور في التشريعات الحديثة التي يواجهها مراكز التحكيم ومن بعض التحديات التي كانت تواجه مراكز التحكيم في مملكة البحرين هي اللغة الإنجليزية في تقديم الطعون أمام محكمة التمييز. في 2023 أصدرنا قرار بالتعاون مع المجلس الأعلى للقضاء بقبول جميع الدعاوى والنظر في جميع الدعاوى باللغة الإنجليزية في جميع مراحلها. فالآن أي حكم يصدر من محاكم التحكيم ويعرض أمام محكمة التمييز للطعون لا يحتاج أن يعرض باللغة العربية، ولكن يستمر بنفس اللغة الإنجليزية. فهذا ما تقدمه المملكة من دعم ومواصلة في تقديم الخدمات التشريعية لهذه المراكز. إضافة هناك قرارات أصدرت من الحكومات من الجهات المعنية تعزز تنفيذ أحكام مراكز التحكيم. وأذكر بالأخص بأن مملكة البحرين أصدرت قانون بالشراكة مع القطاع الخاص في تنفيذ الأحكام، وهذا عزز تنفيذ الأحكام الصادرة من مراكز التحكيم بالاستعانة بالقطاع الخاص لسرعة تنفيذ هذه الأحكام. فهناك يجب أن تكون هناك مسؤولية على الحكومات في تقديم وتطوير التشريعات الخاصة بدعم مراكز التحكيم. شكرا.
Thank you very much. Then if I can ask Your Excellency, Dr. Cheplak, a little bit more specifically, in terms of support, the PCA has entered into a large, well, increasing number of host country agreements in various parts of the world to facilitate arbitration ADR proceedings. I wonder whether you would elaborate on the significance of those agreements. What actually do they achieve? And is it focused on PCA, or is it focused on the host country, or is it perhaps a mixture?
In my previous intervention, I've mentioned that we have this call for being present all around the world, on the one side. On the other side, what we are witnessing these days is further decentralization of international arbitration. So apart from well-established arbitration hubs, we have emerging hubs which will be developing with all the richness, also linguistic, because, let's say, even if it has been stressed here that in many jurisdictions you can have arbitral proceedings in English, I can say we witness more and more use, that other languages than English are increasingly being used in PCA arbitrations. So I think we've just concluded the first investment arbitration at the PCA, which was fully and entirely conducted in Arabic. And if you look at the region, for example, 20% of our cases comes from this region of, let's say, call it Middle East. Now, how we can respond and what we do, we try to partner. So for the local centers, we of course offer a cooperation agreement. For governments, we can propose them to be our hosts, which means, in a nutshell, that we can provide our services in a way we do it in other jurisdictions, having the same legal standards, having the same legal treatment. So from the perspective of the host country, it means that in their own jurisdiction they can have PCA services. Why? Well, because it increases the volume of the cases coming to it, because it's a transfer of knowledge, lots of benefits. And if I may put it in a that way, you can you can develop your own arbitration regional hub without the PCA. Theoretically, it's possible, but it's much more easier if you have PCA on board. So the host country agreement, it is a legal framework which gives all our clients, let's say, the same treatment, immunities and privileges to the PCA as an international organization, as international court. And I'm happy to announce that we've just formally committed to negotiate and conclude the host country agreement with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I acknowledge the presence of the Minister of Commerce, His Excellency Majid bin Abdullah Kasabi, who supported this initiative within the government, and I hope that we will progress on that way. So indeed, host country agreements proved already to be a very, very pragmatic and efficient tool. This is the offer for states. Cooperation agreements, we partner with institutions, and usually we do it together like PCA does in case of Saudi Center for Commercial Arbitration. I think the future of arbitration, it is cooperation, but also arbitration evolves and benefits from the governmental support, which, well, the presence of three distinguished Minister of Justice, I think, sufficiently corroborates my observations.
Thank you very much. And on that note of optimism, I am sorry to report that time is against us. We had a long list of other questions, which we unfortunately now do not have time to get to, for which I'm sorry. But I would like to thank all the panelists very sincerely for some very, very interesting insights into the drivers and enablers of this field from government perspective and from international institution perspective. There are other drivers and enablers we would have discussed, which we'll have to discuss another time. But this is a good start, I think, for the debates that will take place for the rest of the day. Perhaps on behalf of everyone, I'd like to thank all of you very much indeed, and that closes this session. Thank you.